Hi guys, this is a video that I've been meaning to do for ages. This is my power user guide to mix referencing. So to start off with, I want to talk about what mix referencing isn't. Mix referencing isn't trying to get your track to sound like a clone of a professional track. It's actually the complete opposite of that. What we're wanting to do is have several tracks that we're referencing against and sort of approximate. And if we notice that there's, for example, always less bass than every other reference track, then we probably should boost our bass. It just gives us suggestions as what to do. We're not trying to exactly copy EQ curves of tracks that we're hearing. We're not trying to exactly copy the width of a track or the exact levels within that. This is why we make sure that we're listening to several different reference tracks through several different speakers. I've compiled these tricks over quite a few years now of mixing. Whilst I used to mix reference, I wasn't really making the most of the time. Do set aside a good amount of time, especially if you're working for other people, to really make sure that you've got a good mix. I used to be very inconsistent with my mixes. I'd sometimes do a mix that I really felt was of a professional standard. I'd be really excited, really confident, and then my next mix would be really amateur sounding. Now that I've got a method of mix referencing, I find that I'm a lot more consistent at hitting those professional standard mixes, and that's a really rewarding feeling. But I really do put that down 100% to the method rather than myself. So hopefully if you're not feeling you're at the stage yet where you're consistent with your mixes, this might help you out. In this little demo here, I'm going to be using Logic 9 because it's what I've always used, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Whatever DAW you're using, transfer this over. So first of all, before we get into the DAW, how do you pick these reference tracks? What reference tracks are we going for? Well, first of all, ask the client what they are imagining the sound world of their track to be, if they've got any favourite artists or favourite tracks that they'd like to approximate. Make sure that you've got a good mix of tracks that are similar in genre. However, if the client wants something that's completely different to what they're doing, do still listen to that and see if you can identify what it is in that track they're hearing. Do make sure you've got a track in there that is really inspiring for you, even if it's not that similar to what you're working on, something where you think this is a brilliant mix, I really want to aim for that. Make sure as well that you're not referencing against either low quality in terms of the file format and also bad mixes. Even if the client's asked you, oh, I want it to sound like X, Y, and Z, whatever the track is. If you think it's a bad mix, then be very cautious about basically reducing the standard of your mix. You always want to be aiming upwards, okay, rather than trying to bring the quality of your mix down. So let's go over to the DAW and I'll talk you through the process. I've got a little template set up here. I've chosen my reference tracks. For copyright reasons, these are just bounties of my own. So these are all original songs and mixes that I'm working on. They're in various stages, but again, it's the point that's important here. The concept. This top track here is our work in progress, and let's say that the remaining 4 here are our professional songs. So an important point here, guys, is that I have actually leveled the volume of the tracks just approximately, just by ear, so they all roughly sound the same volume, so we don't fall for the louder is better issue. You can see I've set a little loop, and it's just going to loop between them, but of course we don't want all tracks playing at the same time. So the first thing you want to do is come up with a quick way to flick between them. In Logic, the nice easy way to do this is Alt and S, which gets rid of any other solos and mutes that you've got going. So it's a quick way that I can flick between my tracks. I've selected similar sounding sections of the songs. That's a real tongue twister. Similar sounding sections of the songs. Try that at home. Again, because these are my own mixes, they're probably not going to be the most suitable references for this song that we're working on. But you will pick better references and you will have a professional mix that you are judging yours against. Here's the exciting stuff. I've set on my EQs. I've got one here which is low pass EQ and the filter comes off at 200 Hertz. The next one shows me 200 to about 1K, and that's a high pass and low pass. Third EQ, 1K to 5K. These are just approximate bands, guys. As long as you're consistent between the songs, it doesn't really matter. But you can see what I'm going for is lows, low mids, high mids, and here's our highs here, 5K upwards, okay? And again, you want to come up with a quick way to toggle between these, and again, I can Alt-click to activate or deactivate these. We're going to be listening to our track through, let's start with the low pass, everything below 200 Hertz. And I'm going to be flicking between my tracks. And I should really just be alternating between my mix in progress to a reference track, back to my mix in progress, to a reference track, back to my mix in progress, to a reference track. I use a pencil and paper. I just write down anything that I notice. Their kick drum on the reference track might be louder than the bass. So I listen to mine, think, oh, my bass is a bit louder than my kick drum. Is it a problem? Well, I'll listen to the other reference tracks and see what they do. If I notice that, you know, all 4 of my reference tracks have a louder kick than bass, then I'd probably start to question my mixing decision and maybe rebalance that. I'd write down as much information as I could. I'd think how much vocal is in that frequency, how much of the snare is in that frequency, can I hear any of the high percussion in that frequency? Again, if you start hearing a bit of hi-hat in all of your reference tracks and you're not hearing it in yours, then you probably want to make your hi-hat a bit fuller. I'd do the same with my mid-band EQ. And again, I'm listening to all of my instruments, how they feature in each of these frequency bands relative to these commercial standard mixes. And you take as long or as slow as you like flicking between these. Anyway, you're going to work your way through all 4 EQs. So we've done our low mids, we do our high mids, that sounds great. We've taken notes all the way here, and we do our highs. We could then go away and work on those things and end up with a far better mix, no doubt. However, what you then want to do is do that same process, but listening through loads of different speakers. So I'm listening through my main studio monitors here. I'll then repeat that, and I'll listen through my mix cube. So again, I'll be listening to the low end. Not much of that I'm going to hear through my mix cube because it doesn't create low end. So I'm thinking, what can I hear in the commercial tracks through those frequencies, and can I still hear that in my mix? Once I've tried the mix cube, another really useful speaker which I really recommend is the Bose SoundLink Mini 2. Loads of people have got that, or an equivalent speaker. Loads of listeners have got that because they're very reasonably priced. So you do want to make sure that your mix sounds good on that. Your headphones, the go-to headphones for most people are the HD 650s by Sennheiser. I've got a pair of those that I use. Finally, I've got an awful pair of desktop speakers that I bought from Debenhams, and they've got like a water feature in them and lasers and stuff, so they're just purely aesthetic, and they've got a terrible sound. So again, how does the commercial mix sound relative to my mix through those terrible grot boxes? Finally, if you still aren't sure what what any issues are with your track, try going through some Apple Pods or some earbuds, because again they're very popular through your car, through your phone, all these other options as well, and take note of everything that you hear. So by now you should have a massive list, but I promised you some power user tools, so here's the next one. I've just mentioned my mix cube there. Now my mix cube is in mono. Now because it's in mono, that means that especially spatial effects like reverbs, delays, panning effects, things like that, they could become very weak in mono, and things can actually vanish because of phasing. Now, what you've got to remember, guys, is most people listen in mono. If you're in a shop and you see those big round speakers on the ceiling, that's one mono speaker. It's certainly not stereo. Even if you've got a stereo pair of speakers, you have to be sat right in the middle of them, in the sweet spot, in order to really benefit from that stereo image. If you don't have a mix cube, I would massively recommend them. It really has improved my mixes. But if you don't have that, here's another option. I've got this in Logic. You can do this with the gain plugin, and it's got a little mono button there, and you can just listen to everything in mono. Now, this is sort of phantom mono because it's going to come from between the 2 speakers. So it's not true mono, it's not pure mono, but it's definitely better than nothing. Again, listen in mono, listen through all the EQs, listen through all the different sets of speakers. You should at least be able to write down a couple of things on your piece of paper. What you're creating here, guys, is just a list that you can just bosh your way through. Just needs more bass, needs less snare, needs this, that and the other, and you can just go back with real confidence to improve your mix. This plugin here, Center, this comes under the category of mid-side. You can actually repeat this exact same exercise by putting this plugin before the EQs and pull down the sides and listen to everything that's happening in the center of your mix versus everything that's happening in the center of the professional mixes. Go through all the EQ bands, pull down the center, turn up the sides. This is really going to help you get width and depth to your tracks, and you'll actually be surprised at how clear the center channel often is. Often only a few delays in there. Very rarely do you have any sort of stereo reverb filling up that space, but it's often very uncluttered, a lot more so than amateur mixes. And the final thing that you want to do, guys, this is not as important at all, but it is another tool we've got, we might as well use it. These tools here, which are your analyzers. Now you've got an analyzer and a goniometer I'm never sure how to say this. And again, you're just going to be looking for anything. We've gone through listening and listening on lots of different platforms. We're mixing here, guys. This is about what you hear. That's the most important thing. However, sometimes there's stuff going on, especially in the extremes, the low end and the high end. So we can see the dancing here. And then if I flick to one of my other tracks, well, I've got a lot more low end in that. I can see there's more activity happening there. When I kick, my kick's a lot weaker. There's a lot of low end in this track. That's a sub, that. Now, how's my sub looking? Well, it's not as high as that. Do I want to change mine? Well, you know, this is all personal preference. See a lot more low end in that. Now in these examples, guys, the reason there's so much more low end is because they're very genre different. You know, these are mainly dance tracks I'm comparing it against. Obviously the visual thing is purely visual, but for everything else, for the mono, for the EQs, for the center and sides, you need to be listening to as many different speakers as you can. You've got plenty to choose from. It's just more convenient if you've got them all set up in your studio. So hopefully you found that useful, guys. What I really want you to take away from this is, again, the point that this mix referencing, although those were some really useful, at least I found them very useful, ideas about how you can really get a bit more detailed with your mix referencing, listening to those different frequencies and listening to the width as well. It's all about listening, and at the end of the day, even if you're comparing against 4 tracks and they all say turn your bass up, and you think, no, my bass is right, then trust your instincts. You know, if you're happy with your mix, it could actually just be better than those mixes, and that's fine. You're not being immodest by saying, no, my mix is better than those. They actually need to turn their bass down. But hopefully you can see how powerful these tools can be. The takeaway here, guys, is you're going to need to make sure you've got several sets of listening apparatus, whatever that is. A nice template set up for mix referencing so you can get straight into it and you don't have to set these plugins up every single time. And you just devote a bit more time and focus to this. I normally end up with a long list of things that need changing. Every single time I do this, I'll go back and change them, I'll come back and do it again, and I end up with a whole long list of other changes that need to be done. And by all means, please leave comments down below with any questions or videos you'd like to see in the future. And please do give me a like, and here comes the subscribe window right now. Cheers.